Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Collecting Cars. I'm pleased to have this morning joining us is Bob Petersen from Petersen Engineering down in Devon. Hi, Bob.
Hi. Hi.
How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, we've got a beautiful picture of a streamlined Bentley over your shoulder there. Now, I guess not a huge amount of people are going to know, apart from the hardcore car community, Bob, who you are. So would you mind starting off and giving us a bit of a rundown on yourself and Petersen Engineering?
Yeah, sure. I've kind of moved into the market about 30 odd years ago when I was asked to build a very drivable blower Bentley. I had restored blower Bentleys in the past, and they're damn hard work, the original cars to drive. So I put together a project, and we started building these cars. Basically with lighter steering, nicer gearboxes, better brakes. And we've gradually over the years developed them so that these cars are a much more drivable item. Not strictly original, but they're again, what is original these days. The cars are 80, 90 years old, and they've been apart and put back together many, many times. So you end up with a collection of parts in some of the original cars. So I thought I'd start again by using a derelict 1930s Bentley, tear it apart and then build it up as a special, supercharge the engine, and do those modifications just to make the car a nicer car to drive.
So what were you doing? So you say that was 30 years ago, someone approached you to make their Bentley easier to drive. What was that particular car that you converted?
No, I was looking after an original Bentleys for various clients, and those cars they were beautiful original cars worth millions and millions now. But they're not really a very drivable car. Most people these days would find them very, very difficult to actually do. Obviously, you've got the original guys, old school, that know how to drive crash gearboxes and put those cars on the road and drive them hard. That's fine. But the new generation of people that were coming through, even in the 80s and 90s, they did really buy the cars and just put them in collections and not actually drive them. And unfortunately, there was only 43 original blowers in existence now, and they're in big collections around the world. And probably there's only a handful that's regularly driven. So it's a nice thing.
So do you still look after some original blowers?
Not now. No. They tend. It's been quite a while since the last one's come in. I've tended to find that our resources are stretched just building the cars that we're doing. We only build 4 cars a year, so we're not actually mass producing as such. But
they're all to order, are they, Bob?
They are indeed. Yeah, we've got about 70 blowers that we've completed over the years. We've done unsupercharged cars as well and one-off specials for people. But we do the whole thing in-house here. We do everything from the ash frames to the aluminium skins to all the mechanics and all the trim work inside the car. We've tried to do it so that we're not subcontracting the work and we can stay on top of the quality there. I mean, we know what we're producing and the customer can come and see the car.
From start to finish, how long does it take to build one of your
Depends on the specifications. The car you can see over my shoulder, that's a good 2.5 year project, one of the Dartmoor coupes. We've got one in the workshops at the moment. We're building it at the moment, which has got a lower roof line and this built on a supercharged car. But we build them to spec, so it's whatever the car that the customer actually wants. That way, they're getting a very, very unique car. They're not getting the same as somebody else who's just paying the money for them. So every car is really an individual item then.
Yeah. And who is your customer?
Big range. I've got everything from dentists to billionaires it runs right the way through across the spectrum. Engineering people that appreciate maybe that side of things, they tend to go for it. It is a real sort of mixed market. older generation, probably the youngest customer I've got is probably in his 40s, late 30s, early 40s. Probably the oldest one I've got is in his mid 80s.
Yeah.
So there you go. He's on his fourth car at the moment we built for him. So
well, I've got to say, I might try and help bring down your average age at some point, because I know you and I have been talking via Instagram, I think, actually, for the last year or so. And
you've been dealing with Jess, my son. Yeah. He's been talking to you for some time, I guess.
Yeah. So at some point, I'll get myself over the line. Funny enough, we haven't, obviously, none of us are that free to travel at the moment. But when we're on our way down to Cornwall at some stage, when we're allowed, I'm definitely going to stop in and see you.
Well, I'm a lucky boy, because today is a reasonably good weather day, and I'm out in one of the road races, which are actually road testing that, ready for delivery for a customer. So
that's a new build, is it?
That's a new build. That's just coming to fruition. We just MOT'd it and just got the car on the road last week. We're just doing the last sort of shakedown runs with the car now, and then we'll do the final detailing, and that'll be handed over to the customer in a couple of weeks' time. But
when you say road racer, what do you mean by road racer?
Well, you'd have to have a look at the website and see those cars. But it's a two-seater racer. It's a supercharged Bentley. We've developed it over the years. We started off probably back in the late 90s with the idea behind these cars. It's a kind of built-up design from some of the early circuit races at Brooklands, all the way through, but it's blended with a little bit more practicality as well to drive on normal roads these days, not just circuit racer. So it's a pretty quick car in itself. Compared with modern cars, we're talking probably around about 400 foot-pounds of torque and about 300 brake horsepower, which isn't against the exotic stuff you can build today. But when you put that in a package that's only about 1,500 kilograms, 1,500 kilograms, and you're driving on the road, and the weight balance is about 50-50, it's quite an exciting car. It's probably the best way of describing it is almost like a Lotus 7 on steroids. Really.
Yeah, I think when you cut the roof off a car and the windshield as well, I think that probably adds another 500 brake horsepower, doesn't it?
It kind of feels like that, certainly when you're out in the car itself. Yeah, but like I say, you can have a look on the website. You can see what they look like. Yeah.
So you obviously, going back to sort of the re-engineering thing, because what I find most interesting, Bob, about what you do is, and obviously you've been doing it for a long time, but in the last few years, we've seen the rise of Singer Porsche and Twisted with Land Rover Defender, and Alphaholics, the guys in Bristol, doing sort of the Alpha 105 series, and there's more and more of them around the world popping up, resto modding cars to make them more enjoyable for a different generation of buyer. What does the future hold for your type of car?
We're trying to sort of do that at the moment, because the original cars, they were running on carburetors and the old-fashioned ignition systems and things like this, and we've slowly over the years developed them. So you've got much more modern ignition systems in there. We're now putting fuel injection on the cars, but we're doing it in such a way that you wouldn't know it's fuel injected. It still looks like it's got carburetors. It all looks normal. We can even go as far as putting catalytic converters on these things and running them a lot leaner than the original cars were. If we can do it in a way it doesn't show, so that even the so-called original guys would look at it and wouldn't realize what we've done, then we think we've achieved something, because it means that you've then got a car that you can, an average driver that doesn't know vintage Bentleys can get in, press the button and go and actually drive the car. We've got synchromesh gearboxes in there instead of being a crash gearbox. We've got maybe a little lighter steering on there. We can even offer it with power steering if that's what the customer wants. So it really is a kind of, we build it as you want it to be, rather than produce a car, then say, well, it's up to you to go on with it, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're building four cars a year. If someone turns up today and wants to order a blower, what's the waiting time for someone like that?
It's about 18 months. It's about 18 months on each car at the moment.
What, to start, or literally? So if I came and...
You've got to understand. Yeah, I have to actually start with an original Bentley. So those things aren't easy to purchase. So, you know, to go out and just find derelict Bentleys isn't an easy thing to do. They don't come up for sale so much now. Back in the 80s when I started this, I could pick up a car for maybe £2,000 or £3,000. I'm paying £40,000-50,000 for a donor car, which is basically a derelict that's coming out of a barn. It wouldn't probably pay anybody to restore one of these cars back to originality, because very little of it is still existing in the bodywork. And when you've finished, you probably ended up spending twice what the car would ever be worth. Yeah. So those cars, you know, it would just be a saloon Bentley from the 1930s, which is okay. It's a lovely thing, but it probably you'll be well out of pocket on the thing. So by taking one of those cars, taking it apart, putting it back together, using lots of the original components, chassis, bulkheads, steering, suspension, engines, pieces like that, and the axles. We've taken that core of that car and then added the modern engineering to it, and obviously built the new body. And you end up with something that's very, very drivable and obviously very, very desirable then.
Yeah, interesting. So what does the future hold for Petersen Engineering?
I guess we carry on with what we're doing. It's going to be more and more difficult to find these original cars. You know, obviously Bentley's gone along the lines of building the continuation car, which is, you know, quite a few £1 million, and they retooled to do that. So every part of that car is brand new. Unfortunately, when you go along those lines, you end up with a car that possibly, you know, completely and utterly new. What I like to do is, by using these donor cars, the original cars, you've kind of got a car that's risen from the ashes, almost, if you can imagine, and it's got continuous history going all the way back to the 30s, and it kind of feels nice to have got that then.
And so I'm going to have to ask the question, Bob, how much are these cars?
Really, for a blower, one of our blower Bentleys, you're looking with taxes of just over 400,000.
Okay.
Something like the car over my shoulder, you're looking at probably closer to 600,000 to 700,000. One of those, the coupe cars. But
that's
really
all down to the beautiful metalwork, is it? That I guess that a lot more.
It is
time
really
goes
just
into
down to the time. Yeah, it's down to the labour time on the car. So, you know, we've got a group of craftsmen here who make every single part of that bodywork there by hand. There's no molds, or there's no carbon fibre layups and things like this. This is just a piece of aluminium that's beaten into shape. And we obviously, each one of those coupes is completely unique to the car. So even the shape of it is unique each time we build it. So there is no two the same. They are completely individual items, and that's what our customers appreciate.
So I think you mentioned you've got 16 people on the team down there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right, what age are your team? What age are your craftsmen?
I guess the youngest ones they're in their late 20s, and the oldest guys there, unfortunately, is me, I think. But apart from that, it's.
Are you still in your 20s as well?
Oh, I wish. I'm still living there. But,
your son's in the business as well, is he?
Yeah, he does the ash frame. So he works on the ash frames and works with that side of things. My daughter does the trim work inside the car for leather work and so forth.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's a proper family business, yeah.
And so how do you think, you know, is there any thought about trying to attract younger people into this brand? Or
They
the brand's the wrong word, but the product, I guess. You know, these sort of 1920s, 1930s Bentleys.
Yeah, I think it's because they're kind of fearful of it because it's something they don't know. Once you actually get the guys into one of these cars and actually try driving it, and then realise that the excitement. Lots and lots of my customers have been through the range of cars. They've come to me when they've got into, let's say, middle age, and they've had the Lamborghinis, they've had the Ferraris, they've worked their way up. They might have had a vintage Jaguar or something like this, and they've done a few rallies in that. And then they come along and they kind of discover me, and they drive these cars, and they suddenly realised, you know, what wonderful beasts these things were. You're talking about a Formula One car in 1930, because that's really what a blower Bentley was. And these guys used to drive down from the factory, you know, basically down to Le Mans, race the cars, and then drive the cars home afterwards. And
brilliant.
It's a different world, but it's a wonderful world, you know. And once you kind of put your foot into it and you've kind of felt the waters of this thing, then you kind of get hooked. It really in the blood. Yeah.
Well, I've got to say, as I think I said to you just before we started recording, you know, I really believe in this type of thing, and it doesn't have to be about a Bentley, but you know, the modern cars, you know, as legislation changes, as I just can't believe how quick a modern sports car is. It's very difficult to enjoy the performance in something like that, but to hop in an Alfaholics Alpha from the 50s or 60s, you know, a reimagined Porsche from the 70s, and then a Bentley from the 30s. You know, you can have so much fun in these things without breaking the speed limit, and you start also to become more part of a community that's not about the flash. You know, it's about something so much more than that.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's also the drivability of these cars. People don't realise how wonderful they are to drive. At first, they're a bit fearful because you're sitting up high. You're sitting a long way back from the front of the car. It's a different kind of driving position to what you're normally used to in fast cars. But once you get that confidence and you start putting these cars through the corners and start actually moving them around and feeling it's the old saying, it's seat of the pants driving. You know, you can really, really feel it. And it's kind of like the comparison between, you know, your old Porsches from the time, and then you drive a modern GT3 or something like that. When you compare that to an early 911, totally different in power and speed figures and all those sort of things. But the actual drivability of the car there's a thrill to it, and you can't describe that to someone until they've done it correctly.
You mentioned obviously gearboxes, etc., steering.
Yeah.
What one thing Alfaholics said is they're very committed to make sure that you still get that driving characteristics for 105 series Alpha. Do you still get that with yours, regardless of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're still dealing with beam axles in the rear. You've got a live axle on the front running from one side to the other. There's no independent suspension. We obviously increased the braking power of the cars considerably over the originals. So you've got a car now that probably stop like you imagine a modern car would stop. It won't lock up all four wheels or do silly things like that. It will actually do it. An original car, when you put your foot on the brakes of those original cars, you did wonder which side of the road you were going to end up and which hedge you were going to jump, really. But it is, you know, we try to eliminate all that and make the cars feel a lot nicer. And that's what we've achieved what we hoped to do back in 30 odd years ago.
Yeah. Now you touched on it right at the start, talking about the obviously original cars, etc. Now Bentley have obviously got a very passionate, patriotic almost following for their for the original cars. How are your cars seen amongst that crowd?
If there's certainly we all obviously had the distractors at the beginning when we were putting these cars together, and they said, "Oh well, they're not real, and they've been rebuilt and so forth." But the original cars, there's so few of them. There are actually original. They've been rebuilt several times over. Engines have been swapped. They've shortened chassis. They've changed the bodywork on these cars. So it really it's a case of how original is original. And what I try to do is I've not tried to pretend they are. I put a plate on the bulkhead telling everybody exactly what the car is and the components used and the years they were manufactured and what we've done to the car. So we've kind of tried to be honest with people and say, look, this isn't a genuine 1930 blower Bentley. This is a Bentley that's been converted to blower standards and been updated so that the car's drivable. So
yeah,
about it, it's easier to do that than actually try to pull the wool over somebody's eyes and try to pretend they are real, but they're not.
No, well, I guess it's an interesting topic. Porsche, almost since back to day one, people have modified Porsches, but a Porsche's still a Porsche, and it's always been a Porsche. Even a 2.7 RS replica, it's still a 2.7 RS now, and people don't seem to get too offended by that. But in the Bentley world, it's a very different thing because they're so passionate about original cars. But I think for me, what's important that older Bentley community realise that if it might actually be that the entry point through a Petersen Blower is a great way of engaging a younger audience, because I don't know if you've had anyone that's bought your blowers that have then gone on to buy an original car because they've formed part of the club.
I've had it the other way around, Ed. I've got several customers that have got original WO Bentleys, and they keep them in their collections, and they hide them away and drive them maybe once or twice a year. But they actually drive around the rest of the year in one of my cars because they're much more drivable cars. And that's the thing about them. That's what we've tried to achieve. We've tried to do something that puts a smile on their face. They can tour Europe in the summer, go down to Italy for their holidays, and then drive back again. That's damn hard work in an original car. Whereas one of our cars will do all of that and basically still be there the next day just to go down to the pub or the golf course as you would in the Porsche or a Ferrari or something. So it's exactly the same thing, really, Ed, but we've tried to make them livable.
Yeah. So how would one of your cars perform as a daily driver in central London?
Yeah, fine. We used to drive them up. I had a contract with Jack Barclays in London back in the 90s to supply cars.
Well, if you remember, that was, I think, I'm not sure if it was you, Bob, or Jesse that I spoke to, because I was going to bid, or I was bidding on one of those cars in America. The gentleman that bought his car brand new. I think it was sold in the middle of last year. And I to be honest with you, I shouldn't have talked myself out of buying it because that was built on a Rolls-Royce chassis, wasn't it? Not a Bentley chassis.
That's
that one.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. In the early days when I started putting these cars together, I built a couple on Bentley chassis, a couple on Rolls-Royce chassis because they were all 1930s cars. But Jack Barclays came to us and said, look, we'd like you to build a series of cars for us. We call them the Barclay Blowers, and put these things together. And we did that contract. But part of the stipulation was that obviously the cars needed to be drivable. So they said to me, when the cars are complete, what you do is you get in the car down in West Devon, and you drive it to London, you drive through London's traffic, and you deliver it to Berkeley Square in London, just to prove that the cars can do what you're saying it's doing. And I used to go great fun leaving here early in the morning and driving up to drive through London in one of these blowers. And we literally stopped the traffic when we were going through town.
I bet you did. Good. Well, look, Bob, thank you so much for joining us on a Monday morning. I'm sure that you've got a lot to do. And anything else that you wanted to chat about whilst you're on with us? No,
Ed, you're very welcome. Pop down and see us, and we'll give you a drive out in the cars, and you can enjoy the Devon countryside and drive a blower Bentley. And I think
I'd definitely love to do that. We should also. I'll get James Little in touch with Jesse. James does all of our videos, so at some point I'll get him to come down and see you, so we can show our audience what your cars are like to be driven out on the road. Yeah, sounds fun. Look forward to it. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Bob, and we'll be in touch very soon. Okay, thank you. Bye for now. Bye. Nice talking. Thank you. Bye-bye.